All right, so to recap where we've been, last week we talked about, has God really said? And that question comes to us from the serpent in the Garden of Eden. And so we find ourselves today needing to ask this question, because the days that we live in, you can't assume much about anything these days. Nothing is really self-evident anymore. So things need to be discussed. They need to be talked about. They need to be supported with evidence. And so we need to have a reason for why we believe what we believe. And we looked at a few reasons why last week the Bible makes sense, logically speaking. And one of the things that is talked about a lot, by people who read the Bible, is that it's not a science book. It's not intended to be a history book. But for a book that's not trying to do science or do history, it does a pretty darn good job of being pretty darn accurate on both of those fronts. And that fact helps us to have support for why the Bible is true. Why should we look at it as truth? Now remember, we're still trying to look at the Bible from the perspective of the Proverbs 31 woman, the wise woman. She's more precious than jewels, right? And so being more precious than jewels is talking about wisdom specifically. And so the bride characteristic that we need to have is to be wise. The bride needs to be wise. And one of the ways we do that is by understanding our scripture. And the first woman that that we see in the Bible, the story that's being told there, is a woman who's being asked this question: has God really said this? And it leads to the search for their own wisdom rather than relying on what God has said. So for us today, the challenge is, 2,000, 4,000 years later after it's been written, can we still rely on it? Can we still trust that it's God's word, that it was handed down to us accurately, that it was handed down to us in a way that we can rely on it? And so we're going to go on that adventure a little bit today, just to kind of research that. And so the first verse I want to cover, we covered it last week, Proverbs 14:15. Let's read it again. One of the reasons why we want to study these things out for ourselves and not just take somebody else's word for it. Proverbs 14:15.
The naive believes every word, but the shrewd discerns his steps.
The naive or the simple believe every word, but the shrewd or the wise, they give thought to their steps. So we can't just believe everything we hear. And let's face it, in these circles, we could hear a lot of things that sound good but may not be good. And we need to be on the lookout for those things and ensure that we're not going down the wrong path, or a path that leads us away from God's truth. So let's look again at Proverbs 9, verses 4 through 6.
Whoever is simple, let him turn in here. As for him who lacks understanding, she says to him, come eat of my bread and drink of the wine I have mixed. Forsake foolishness and live, and go in the way of understanding.
Okay, so this is wisdom's cry to the people who she's trying to reach out to. She set herself up in the city gates, the busy streets. She's taken her place, and she's calling out to the simple, or the naive. Hey, if you lack knowledge, if you lack wisdom, turn in here, and I will give it to you. These are my benefits. Folly has done the same thing as well. Folly sets up a booth, if you will, and calls out to the simple also. And so there's a call out for all of us. Where do we turn in? All right? And so ideally, we would be turning into wisdom's inn, wisdom's abode, right? Wisdom's house. That's where we want to be, and we want to stay away from Lady Folly and everything that has to come from her. So one of the ways that we can turn to wisdom is by reading God's Word. God's Word is wisdom. It tells us that in many places. God's Word is truth. And sometimes it's tempting to want to go beyond what's written and start looking at things that are hidden, right? Things that are mysterious, that sound good, but we don't have a lot of insight about it. So we want to make sure that where we're putting our focus is on what has been revealed to us. And so let's look at Deuteronomy chapter 29, verse 29. And we've covered this verse in the past, but it's important to reiterate it again, the importance of God's Word and searching it out.
The secret things belong to the Lord our God, but the things that are revealed belongs to us and to our children forever, that we may do all the words of this law.
All right, so the secret things belong to God, but the things that are written in Torah and the writings and the prophets, those things belong to the children of Israel and their descendants. So you have a distinction between general revelation, which is open to all. So Mother Nature, if you will, nature itself is a type of revelation to people. Hey, this is pretty orderly. These things happen year after year in this sequence. And we can see from nature that there's design in creation. So therefore, there should be a creator. What does he want? How do we please him? And so on and so forth. So you have that general revelation. With Torah, though, you have specific revelation. You have special revelation. And it's that's what the Bible claims throughout itself, especially in the Old Testament. The Lord said, the Lord spoke, the Lord commanded, right? The Lord is the one, Yahweh is the one who is given these special instructions. So if we believe that the creator of the universe is the one who gave us these books, right, that we call, that make up our Bible, then what we should expect to see is some insight from the mind of the Creator in the words that we are reading that help us understand our world. So those are going to be a few of the things that we're going to look at. We talked about it last week, a few of those things, the hydrologic cycle. There are different verses in the Bible that describe that very cycle, and yet it wasn't discovered by modern scientists until modern times. And yet it's been in the Bible for thousands and thousands of years, adding validity to the words that it's talking about, right? If these types of things are true and accurate, then we should be able to rely on the other words that are being described for us, that are being revealed to us in the Torah. So we have to make sure, we have to put on our investigation skills. We gotta have our investigation skills and put them to good use. We gotta have a curiosity and for wanting to know the truth and wanting to look at things critically, so that way we can kind of see where God has given us these different insights that we can pull from and use those tools, if you will, as convincing arguments for non-believers or even other people who are believers but might see things slightly differently. So we want to use our critical thinking skills, and we want to make sure we're treating the data honestly. So you have, in order to get to wisdom, right? Wisdom builds on itself. You can't just be downloaded with wisdom for the most part. There are a few exceptions outlined in the Bible. The creators of the temple, for example, are examples of the exception to the rule. But the general rule is wisdom has to build off of knowledge. Knowledge builds off of information. Information is built off of data. So data by itself doesn't give us a whole lot, but it gives us some context, and we can turn that into information and take it back up the cycle to getting up to wisdom, knowing how to apply these things that are spoken about in the Word. So let's look at the concept of reliability of the Old Testament. There's a gentleman by the name of J. Warner Wallace, who has a website and YouTube channel and podcast, and it's called Cold Case Christianity, I believe is what it's called. He does a phenomenal job of outlining the reasons why the New Testament is very reliable, and how he went from being an atheist to becoming not just a believer, but essentially an apologist, someone who's defending the faith. And he is, for your information, he is a cold case investigator. So he solves cold case murders and things like that. So he's dealing with cases that have they've gone nowhere, right? And the evidence is 10, 20, 30, 40 years old. So he's got a really fine-tuned skill set for helping us as believers look at the evidence of the New Testament as well as the Old Testament to come to piece together a case for why the Bible that we have is very accurate and reliable for us today. So let's look at Genesis. We're going to look at some different truths. So Genesis 7 verse 11, Genesis 8:2.
On the 17th day of the second month of the 600th year of Noah's life, all the fountains of the great deep were broken up, and the windows of the sky were opened.
The fountains of the great deep. Okay, hold that thought in your mind, and we'll read chapter 8, verse 2.
The fountain of the deep and the windows of the heavens were also stopped, and the rain from heaven was restrained.
All right, so they opened and they closed. All right, now let's jump to Proverbs 8:28, and then somebody else go to Job 38, verse 16.
When he established the clouds above, when he strengthened the fountains of the deep.
So talking about fountains of the deep, again. All right, and then Job 38:16.
Have you entered into the springs of the sea, or walked in the recesses of the deep?
So the springs of the sea. Now, this is I mentioned this last week, and I'll say it again. We tend to take our Bible for granted. We just read over that, and it's just like, okay, springs of the deep, big whoop, no big deal. Let's move on. Let's get to the good stuff, right? But we're overlooking the details. Springs of the deep. These people wrote these scriptures in ancient times. Did they have access to be able to verify springs of the deep or fountains of the deep on the ocean floor? No, they did not. It wasn't until 1977, actually, that thermal vents were discovered by scientists in these mini subs, just trying to explore the Earth's surface, or the ocean surface, if you will. For a long time, it was believed that the ocean floor was like a bowl, and the middle of it was going to be the deepest part. But that's not necessarily so. It's contoured. The verse in Job talked about it. And other verses in your Bible talk about it describes the ocean floor very differently in Jewish literature than it was talked about or written about in other cultures. How do you get that information without divine inspiration? So we're trying to make a case that the Bible is not just a word that we can rely on that's true, that's historically and scientifically accurate in many respects, but that it has divine authorship. That's the claim that believers of the Bible are making, and it's the claim that the Bible itself makes. The Lord said, the Lord commanded, the Lord spoke. So we're trying to show that there are things that these writers had no business knowing in the natural sense. But it was because of that divine inspiration that they were given that they chose to write these things down that they didn't understand at the times, but accepted to be true because they believed it came from God. All right, so that's hydrothermal vents on the ocean floor. All right, moving on. Psalm 8. Somebody please read verses 5 through 9. And then Ecclesiastes 1:6.
Is it all right if I start with verse 4 there?
I guess you could go with verse 4. That's fine.
What is man that you remember him, and the Son of Man that you visit him? Yet you have made him a little less than Elohim, and have crowned him with esteem, and you made him rule over the works of your hands. You have put all under his feet, all sheep and oxen, and all the beasts of the field, the birds of the heavens, and the fish of the sea, passing through the paths of the seas. O Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, our master, how excellent is your name in all the earth.
How excellent is your name in all the earth, right? Man, that's the one we want to end on, all right?
Amen.
He's a good God. He's awesome. He's wise. But we overlooked something. The verse just before that. The fish going in the paths of the seas. Fish in the paths of the seas. Do seas have paths?
ISV says currents.
Currents? Okay. They do have paths. They do. The sea does have paths. There's a guy by the name of Matthew Murray who believed his Bible so much that he, in the 1800s, I think he lived, I think he died in 1873 or something like that. He was in the U.S. Navy, and he is considered one of the fathers of oceanography because he read his Bible, that particular verse right there, the paths of the seas. He was a Navy man, so he was interested in the seas because of his naval background. And so he went to investigate this claim that is presented in the scriptures, and it was proven to be true that there are currents in the seas that that animals can go on and whatnot. But the fact that they exist is he was nominated as one of the greatest Americans because of this discovery, along with some other ones that he discovered, but he doesn't take credit for it. But he's the one that gets his name next to it in the history books. But he was going off of his Bible because he believed it to be true. He also looked at Ecclesiastes 1:6. Let's look at that one.
The wind goes toward the south and turns around to the north. The wind whirls about continually and comes again on its circuit.
So we're talking about, it doesn't sound like much, right? It doesn't sound like much. It might even seem boring to some, but it's talking about something that actually exists, but that the writer himself would not have any reason to know that it exists because of the time frame that he's living in, the tools that he has available to him. So it's, in my mind, it's further proof that this is an inspired book, that this person is written from a place of inspiration because of the knowledge that he has about the natural world, that the cultures around him and even the ones that aren't around him, they don't have these types of insights. They're not scientifically accurate or provable, but yet the Bible is relied on to be able to make these types of claims over and over again. And it's been working out pretty well so far. All right, so let's look at one more in that regard. Job 28, verses 25 through 28. We've looked at this section of Scripture as well as it pertains to wisdom and where it can be found. And it's interesting that earlier we looked at the call of wisdom in the book of Proverbs and how the call of wisdom, wisdom is saying she was there when these things were created. And then in Job, we see again wisdom being used to describe something that wouldn't normally be understood by an ancient people without divine inspiration. So Job 28, verses 25 through 28.
When he imparted weight to the wind, he assessed the waters by measure. When he made a limit for the rain and a course for the thunderbolt, then he saw it and declared it, and he established it and also searched it out. And to mankind he said, Behold, the fear of the Lord, that is wisdom, and to turn away from evil is understanding.
He gave wind its measure, weight. They wouldn't have necessarily had a way to measure wind in those days, or air in those days, but we can measure them with our technology today. And it does indeed have a measurement of weight that that science can determine. And so we're not using science to prove that God exists necessarily, but science is itself a discovery of how God organized the world, how God ordained things to operate. It says in there, in some translations, it uses the word decree. God decreed a path for the rain or a path for the thunderbolt. And these things, we call them natural laws, right? Natural laws are God's decrees. This is what He has said. The Bible is making the claim that these things work because of Yahweh. Yahweh is the one that ordained these things to be so. And so you have that general revelation that's open to all. There's a designer behind these different facets of creation. I didn't write this in my notes, but one of the things that I also found very interesting, the Fibonacci sequence. Is anyone? You've got the spiral essentially. It's a pattern that reoccurs in many different areas of creation, over and over and over again. It's a pattern. You can't get the same pattern in the same ratios with evolution. In different aspects, right? In different areas of creation. You can't get that with evolution, with the stories that evolution would have you believe. It doesn't work that way. It's a sign, it's a signature, if you will, of the Creator. He's got a pattern. He's trying to reveal Himself. But as we've talked about in the past, He's cloaked His words, right? So that only those who truly have a heart to understand Him are going to be able to see these things and desire to investigate them further, to pursue a relationship with Him, right? So it's the same thing within our Bible. Not everything that we read in the Bible is going to make sense on the surface, and that's by design. So it's to help weed out the people who aren't truly interested in it with their heart. So we've got to make sure if we call ourselves believers and students of the book, disciples, and we're trying to be kingdom citizens, that we investigate these things for ourselves. We have that curiosity, right? We want to know what these things say and have an answer for the questions that might come our way. Because, like I said, we live in a day and age where nothing is self-evident anymore. You can't say we hold these truths to be self-evident, right? Because there's always somebody that's got something to say to question it. We're not entitled to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So on and so forth. That's what people will make these arguments because of the day that we live in. But these self-evident things, they come from God. But we need to be able to defend them. We need to be able to understand how they work. One of the things that is very fascinating from the archaeological side, right, looking at evidence that supports the Bible, so far in the Old Testament, there have been 53 people that have been proven from the archaeological record to exist. So 53 people from the Old Testament in your Bible have been proven to exist from the archaeological record, which is very challenging to do because in archaeology you're working with fractions of information. You've got a pottery shard over here. You've got a tablet over here. You've got a monument that's busted down over here underneath the dirt, and it barely says something to the effect of whatever the case might be. And yet over and over and over again we see these people that are talked about in the Bible that have proofs in the archaeological record that they existed. At least that they existed. So you would expect to find at least a few instances, if the Bible was historically accurate, of these touch points, if you will, of information that shows that you can corroborate what the Bible is actually saying. And that's exactly what we see. We do see archaeological evidence that supports the Bible's narrative. Genesis chapter 2 is told from the perspective of He's walking in the garden in the cool of the day. He's a personal God. He's there. He's wanting to have fellowship with his creation. So if you're trying to compile, if you're a scribe, in the days of King David or the days of King Solomon or whoever, right? And you've got these different accounts, which one do you include in the Bible? One or the other? No, he included them both. That doesn't mean that it's not inspired. Each one is inspired, and it tells you something different about God. It gives you a different perspective on who God is. Yes, he's out there, and he's bigger than creation itself, and yet he still desires to have a personal relationship with his creation. So can Moses see something, right, in the oral record? Because in those days, let's face it, the oral record was the majority of what they had, because not very many people knew how to read and write in their native tongue. So the oral record is what they would have had primarily to go off of. So can he be drawing from that story? Yes, absolutely, and still have divine inspiration for how it really went down.
Yes, I mean, we can even look at the accounts of Matthew, Mark, and John. It's the same thing.
Right, absolutely. Each one told from a different perspective. Are any of them false? No, they're not. They each tell us something different about God, and that's something that's really cool about the J. Warner Wallace guy and his work, The Cold Case Christianity, is as an investigator, you want to separate the witnesses, right? If the crime has been committed, you want to separate the witnesses, and you want to interview each one individually so that they don't have a chance to get their story all in sync. Because if their story is exactly the same across the board, chances are they're lying. They had time to get together and think about it, right? And cook up the story, and okay, we need to all be on the same page, right? That would tell an investigator, okay, you guys are lying, because that's impossible in a normal situation. It doesn't matter if something were to happen right here in the middle of the room, because of where we're sitting or standing, because of the personal experiences that we've had in the past, right? How we think about things, our job, how we process information, we're going to see that same event very, very differently. And if we're interviewed and asked those questions, okay, what happened? Okay, well, this is what I saw. Well, what was he wearing? Okay, this is what I saw him wearing. Or what, how did it go down? And so you're going to get different stories, and that's normal and that's natural. One of the criticisms against the Bible is that there are so many thousands of copies and discrepancies in every single one. There's a guy. I can't remember his name, but apparently he teaches like Bible college, but is an atheist because of the fact when he came to this realization that there are more textual variances in the written record. Right, we have copies of copies of copies of copies of copies of copies. There's thousands of copies. Supposedly, there's more copies than there are words in the New Testament. And when you put that information together, it's like, wow, there's more differences in the written record than there are words in the record that they're writing about. That doesn't sound right. That doesn't sound. So to this Bible scholar, right, who doesn't believe in God because of all the changes, that was evidence for him to not trust the Word. But when you dig into the textual differences, what you'll find is the story hasn't changed much. There's little changes, here and there. The word "yet" gets added or taken out, or it's the difference between homonyms, whatever. A word that sounds the same but spelled differently, right? So you'll get those kinds of differences as well. And so what this cold case investigator says that these variants are able to do is to help us to spot the errors. You gather so much of the information, and so you would use the majority wins the vote, if you will, right? So out of these 2,000 records, 975,000 of them, whatever, I'm making up numbers, says, this sentence this way, and then these 500 over here have it this way. So majority rules, this is, this is what the error is, right? And so on and so forth for all of the different versions and variances that we have. You can spot where the error is by looking at all of the different variances, if that makes sense. Okay. All right. Let's look at Deuteronomy 18, verse 22, and then somebody else look at Isaiah 46, verse 10. We're looking at the concept of divine authorship.
When a prophet speaks in Yah's name and the word does not happen to come true, that is a word that Yah has not spoken. The prophet has spoken it presumptuously. Do not be afraid of it.
Okay, so Moses is giving us instructions, from God, right? This is the claim on how to spot a legitimate prophet versus a false prophet. And if he says something and it comes true, then he's probably a true prophet. If he says, let's go and worship other gods, okay, that's a false prophet, and the Lord your God is testing you. But if he says something and it doesn't come to pass, then that means that he's a false prophet, that prophet spoke presumptuously. You can look in Jeremiah's account. He has a battle, if you will, with other prophets of God. But guess whose book is in the canon? His book, not theirs, because what he prophesied came to pass. Right. Not theirs. Hananiah, I think, is the guy that he battled against, if you will, in the court, right? Jeremiah is saying that God is speaking to him, saying, "Hey, the king of Babylon is going to come. He's going to wipe out the city. You need to surrender. God has brought him here to punish you for your wickedness." And Hananiah, I think it's Hananiah is how you say it. And the other prophets, all the other prophets are saying, no. They're preaching the patriotic theme. God is our God. He's going to fight for us. He's with us. There's no way the king of Babylon is going to be able to take us out. And what happened? The king of Babylon wiped them out. So the people who are looking at these records, they can say, Jeremiah made a claim. He prophesied that we would be taken out. Oh, what do you know? That's what happened. Therefore, we know, because Deuteronomy tells us how to spot a true prophet, that Jeremiah is a true prophet. So his writings that we can attribute to him needs to be included in the Old Testament canon. All right? We're gonna keep building on this. So hopefully it gets a little bit more interesting. I don't know, maybe. Okay, Isaiah 46:10.
Declaring the end from the beginning and the ancient time, things not yet done, saying, my counsel shall stand, and I will accomplish all my purpose.
All right, so God is telling Isaiah, right? My plan is going to stand. This is how you'll know, right, that it's of me. Okay, I know the end from the beginning, and there's another verse, and I didn't include it in the lesson, but there's another verse that talks about how God doesn't do anything without first revealing it to his prophets, right? So God's not going to move and act unless he has revealed it to his prophets first, right? And so there's this, what you got, Al?
No, it just makes me think of Matthew, think not that I've come to destroy, talking about the prophets again.
Yeah. Yeah? Right, so you have the different classifications of the Old Testament. You have the law, and you have the prophets, and you have the writings. And Yeshua is establishing all of them. He's confirming all of them. And so we'll touch on that a little bit more later. Okay, so you have this concept that this prophecy is what differentiates the Bible from other literature as far as being the inspired Word of God. Things that are prophesied that come to pass before they take place is inspiration that the natural man is not going to have. So therefore, it's affirming the divine authorship. So even though we have this written word, right? We have a physical copy of the Bible. It's written down, and it's written down by multiple different authors. The ultimate author is still Yahweh. If that makes because of the prophecies that are coming true in them. And so, let's go Deuteronomy. Let's look at more authorship. Deuteronomy 31, verses 24 through 26.
It came about when Moses finished writing the word of the law in a book until they were complete, that Moses commanded the Levites who carried the Ark of Covenant of the Lord, saying, Take the book of the law and place it beside the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God, so that it may remain there as a witness against you.
If we're not looking at it critically, we'll overlook it, right? The people believed that Moses was a true prophet because of the things that he did, right? Because of the things that he did. God used Moses to set the people free from Egypt. He used Moses to, hey, Moses, do this thing and we'll part the Red Sea. It's God who's doing it, but he's confirming these acts through the works of Moses so that the people would believe in Moses that he is a true prophet. It was probably a few months ago that I remember thinking to myself as I'm reading through Scripture and listening to people argue about the law of Moses, the law of Moses. And I'm like, it's not even the law of Moses. God's the one that gave it to him. It's the law of God. It's not the law of Moses. But from a critical thinking standpoint, you do have to add that it's the law of Moses. Because if it's not the law of Moses, who was a true prophet of God, then how can you trust that these words are true? So either Moses is lying, right, or it's not really right, or that's the biggest thing, right? Is Moses must be lying. If these aren't truly God's words, then Moses is a liar. But there's evidence, archaeological and otherwise, to prove that what Moses had done what was from God. That there's no other way that it could have possibly been from anybody else, right? It's not man's own invention, right? So the people accepted that Moses was a prophet, and the things that he wrote down, right? So we know that he wrote, right? From this verse, we know that he wrote things down, and they were instructed to put it in the Ark of the Covenant, next to the Ark of the Covenant. That's in the temple, right? That's in the temple. These people would not have done that if they didn't believe Moses to be a true prophet. So, and it's there to serve as a witness against these people, right? And so, history is written by the winners. Usually, that's how we typically look at it. But if history is written by the winner, why do we see Israel getting beat up over and over again? Right? It's for their failure to obey.
Right.
So these things are being included as a way of showing, hey, God is the creator. God is the one who is doing these things. And you do things God's way, or he gives you the consequences. All right.
Expound on what you just said about
Yeah.
people saying the law of Moses. I think that's something that's very common in the modern church, just before they say ignore it, because it's just the law of a man.
Yeah.
In people's minds, they hear the law of Moses and they think, oh, it's just an old man from 4,000 years ago.
Right.
It's not God.
Yeah, absolutely. And so they use it to discount it, right? They don't discount that Moses is the one who wrote it, right? There are other people that do that. But they use it to discount them as reasons why we shouldn't have to keep them, because they're man's laws, not God's laws. It's like, well, if you read the story, the Lord said to Moses, write this down. The Lord spoke to Moses, write this down.
Right.
The Lord commanded Moses, do this thing, write it down, right? Over and over and over and over again. It's a repetition, right? And it has to be this many times, so that way you couldn't honestly say, if you were truly looking at it critically and treating it honestly, that, God didn't really say. Has God really said? Right? Over and over and over again, these things were done, came to pass. Moses is a true prophet. Moses wrote it down because God told him to. All right. Let's look at more authorship. Joshua 24:26.
Then Yahushua wrote these words in the book of the Torah of Elohim. And he took a large stone and set it up there under the oak that was by the set-apart place of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh.
Joshua is the author, right? We look at Joshua as being the author of Joshua. And so now we see at the end, he's writing it down, and now because of the things that the people have seen Joshua do, right? The things that they've seen God do through Joshua, helping them conquer the promised land, led them to believe that Joshua was a true prophet of God. Therefore, his book is in the canon. not the leader that they were going to try to elect to take them back to Egypt, right? His writings aren't in there. It's Joshua's writings, right? Okay. Let's look at 1 Samuel chapter 10, verse 25.
Then Samuel explained to the people the behavior of royalty and wrote it in a book and laid it before the Lord. And Samuel sent all the people away, every man to his house.
So Samuel explained, Samuel wrote, Samuel gave it to the people. The things that the people saw Samuel do, right, confirmed that he was a true prophet of God. Eli, the high priest, wasn't doing what he was supposed to be doing. His sons weren't doing what they were supposed to be doing, right? They were working, they were supposed to be working for God, but they didn't represent him well to the people. Samuel did. And Samuel's work is included, right, in our canon. Samuel wrote it, Samuel explained it, and he put it before the Lord. They wouldn't have done that if they didn't believe that Samuel was a true prophet. So because the things that Samuel said came to pass. So he passed the test for a true prophet. All right. Let's look at, we'll look at Jeremiah 25:11 and Daniel 9:2. So just some further proof for the book of Jeremiah about him being a true prophet.
And this whole land shall be a desolation and an astonishment, and these nations shall serve the king of Babylon 70 years.
So the people of Israel would serve the king of Babylon in 70 years. For 70 years, the land in Israel was going to be desolate. Let's look at Daniel 9:2.
In the first year of his reign, I, Daniel, noted in the scripture the total years that were assigned by the message of the Lord to Jeremiah the prophet for the completion of the desolations of Jerusalem, 70 years.
Okay, so Daniel is inquiring, when is this going to end? And somehow he gets the book of Jeremiah, right? And determines from the book, right, from Scripture, that it's going to end in 70 years, right? So Daniel is looking at this proof that Jeremiah is a legitimate prophet, because the things that he wrote came to pass. So hopefully that helps illuminate some of the reasons why we have the books that we have in our Bible, and why some of them were excluded that are possible, but not in the canon as well. This test is a very common test, and the people had to recognize the author as a genuine prophet before they would recognize his writings, before they would recognize his works, and include it in the canon. So over and over and over and over again, we see that being the case. Does anybody have the book of Maccabees, access to the book of Maccabees? Right, so I want to look at 1 Maccabees chapter 4, verse 46, to kind of confirm this idea about prophets being the ones that are writing these the scriptures in the Old Testament.
And laid up the stones in the mountain of the temple in a convenient place until there should come a prophet to show what would be done with them.
All right. So for context, this is the stones from where they made the sacrifice of the pig and whatnot. All this stuff is going on, and they're like, okay, what do we do? We've cleansed the temple. Can we use these stones? Some say yes, some say no. Okay, what do we do? All right, let's just set them aside, and we'll wait for a true prophet to come and tell us what to do with these stones. So we're just going to put them in a convenient place to the side and be told by a prophet what to do. What can we deduce from that verse? That they didn't have a legitimate prophet to tell them at that time what they should do. So for a long time, they were without a prophet. The purpose of the prophets was to help Israel stay on track with the Torah, with the law of God. And the people weren't very responsive to the prophets. There was not a single prophet that they did not persecute and or try to kill.
Yeah.
Right? So it's not because God wasn't it's not because God was ineffective, but because of the condition of their hearts. The condition of their hearts wasn't right. Right? So the prophets that God was sending right? These people are persecuted because we want you to prophesy smooth things, easy things. You scratch our itching ears. Don't tell us hard things, right? That was the accusation, I believe, in Isaiah. And you also have Josephus, right? So Josephus is writing after the works of Christ, and he comes on the scene and is forced into talking about Jewish history, not because he wants to, but hey, you're going to do this, or we'll probably kill you. And so he's like, okay, reluctantly, I'm going to tell you the history of the Jews. And one of the things that he confirms in his writings, right? So he's not a prophet. He's not a follower of Yeshua, but he is a Jewish historian, and he's writing from his perspective of what he knows, what's been passed down to him. And what he records in some of his writings is that they did not have a prophet for a long time. They believed Zechariah, Malachi, Haggai, or whatever, those guys were the last prophets. So you have roughly 400 years of quote-unquote silence from God, not giving a prophet. It doesn't mean that God wasn't active, right? But it meant that there was no prophet given to the people. So there were no writings from that time period that they felt they should include in the Old Testament canon. Because they had a Hebrew Bible, and it included the Torah and many of the other things that we have in our book today, right? Because the people who wrote these things were proven to be true prophets. So if it's a true prophet, we're going to include it as part of the Word of God, right? And then you have a lot of New Testament writers, right? The people who did follow Yeshua. So before Josephus, that also are attesting to the validity of Scripture and the fact that it can be relied on as truth. So look at 2 Timothy chapter 3, verses 14 through 17. And then somebody go to 2 Peter chapter 1 and read verses 19 through chapter 2, verse 1.
But as for you, continue in what you have learned and have firmly believed, knowing from whom you learned it, and how from childhood you have been acquainted with the sacred writings, which are able to make you wise for salvation through faith in Christ Jesus.
Awesome. Thank you very much. So Timothy had been instructed from a young age on wisdom. He'd been instructed in the ways of the Scriptures. He was familiar with the Old Testament.
Furthermore, we have the reliable prophetic word. You do well by paying attention to it as to a lamp shining in a dark place, until the day dawns and the morning star arises in your hearts. Above all, understand this. No prophecy of Scripture comes about from a person's own interpretation. For no prophecy was ever brought forth by human will. Rather, people spoke from God as they were moved by the Ruach HaKodesh. But false prophets also arose among the people, just as there will also be false teachers among you. They will secretly bring in destructive heresies. They will even deny the master who bought them, bringing swift destruction upon themselves.
Okay, so you have Peter making a distinction between what is Holy Scripture, what is how did it come about, versus what's coming. He's telling you what's going to come in the future, right? And so Peter tells us that the prophecy isn't based on a private interpretation. So Hananiah, the prophet that battled against Jeremiah, saying, "Oh no, God says this," da 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 da. That didn't come to pass. That was his own private interpretation of what he wanted to believe. That wasn't the inspired word of God. Jeremiah's prophecies were inspired by the Word of God. So these things have divine authorship, so therefore we can rely on them to tell us the truth, to tell us the history of how these things come to pass, right? Versus things that Maccabees is a good history, but it doesn't mean that it's inspired, right? That's why it's not necessarily included in one canon. But it is included in the what they call the Deuterocanon, the second canon in the Catholic Church. Apparently, they don't like it being called the Apocrypha. They like to call it the Deuterocanon, which is the second canon. So it's not quite the same level as the first canon. So it's useful, but maybe not the divine authorship, right? So it's questionable. But it's also why a lot of other things were excluded, because there was nothing in them to back them up that show that they were accurate interpretations, that they were true prophecies being fulfilled, and that the person writing them wrote them at a time when it could be prophecy versus after the fact, trying to pass it off as prophecy. Yes?
So I have a Bible study that I'm in, and we're studying Daniel. And in Daniel, the king has a dream that he wants interpreted. And he calls all the wise men and all the prophets and all those guys. And he says, interpret my dream. And he won't tell them what the dream is.
Right.
And he says, I don't trust you.
Right.
Because if I tell you my dream, you'll just tickle my ears and tell me what I need to hear or what I want to hear, right? He says, I want you to tell me my dream and then interpret it. And he says, if you don't, I'm going to kill you all, right? So Daniel is the one who's truly after God's own heart.
Yeah.
And he tells him the dream and interprets it. So that's a good example of not really trusting those men, right? Mm-hmm. And their intentions, and truly doing exactly what you're saying. Did what they say come true, because it's truly Yahweh speaking through that man.
Right.
You know? And
Absolutely.
the trust that means from that.
Right. The first thing that he did, right, was being able to tell him what his dream was.
That's right.
Which was proof to the king, because even though I didn't tell you, now I know that you have the ability to tell me what it means, the correct interpretation. Because like you said, I'm not interested in having it tickle my ears. I want to know the truth, because this thing so disturbed me.
That's right.
I need to know the truth. And Yahweh is the one that can give it to you, right? I mean, you see it over and over again. Your word is truth, right? Your law is truth. Your law is wisdom. Your law is a lamp. Your law is a light. Over and over and over again, this idea that the words of God, the words in the Bible, the things that he said, spoke, and commanded, has the ability to transform your life if you let it.
And that's why it's important that we know it's truly of him.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. All right. Let's look at 2 Peter chapter 2, verses 4 through 10.
For if God did not spare angels when they sinned, but cast them into hell, and committed them to chains of gloomy darkness to be kept until the judgment, if he did not spare the ancient world, but preserved Noah, a hero of righteousness, with 7 others, when he brought a flood upon the world, the ungodly, if by turning the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah to ashes he condemned them to extinction, making them an example of what is going to happen to the ungodly. And if he rescued righteous Lot, greatly distressed by the sensual conduct of the wicked, whereas that righteous man lived among them day after day, he was tormenting his righteous soul over their lawless deeds that he saw in herald. Then the Lord knows how to rescue the godly from trials, and to keep the unrighteous under punishment until the day of judgment, and especially those who indulge in the lust of defiling passions and despise authority.
Peter is talking about false prophets, and in order to help make his point, he's confirming the events of the flood story, right? He's getting it from Torah. He's getting it from Genesis. So what I'm trying to use, Peter to help do, and there are other verses as well that that do this. Using, we can confirm, a lot more easy the fact that the New Testament is, what it says it is, right? That Yeshua did raise from the dead, and these people, right? They had very little reason to lie, right? When they wrote these things down, because when you according to some investigators, the bias, right? Someone who's going to tell you something because they have a bias or an agenda. It boils down to 3 reasons. Or like people commit murder, right, for 3 reasons. One is greed. One is, lusts, so sexual or relational lust. And the third one is power, right? So did the disciples of Yeshua, did they get all kinds of money? Did they make out with loads of money? No, they didn't. Did they get relationships that they were, did they, get lucky a lot? Well, there's no evidence that happened either. Did they get power? No, they all died. In this world, right, they all died horrible, gruesome deaths, given multiple chances to recant, right, to say, tell us the truth. Did Jesus raise from the dead? Yes or no, right? And they're not denying him. They're not gaining power. So if they're not, they're not telling it for greed, for money. They're not telling it for relationships. They're not telling it for power. So it's got to be,
That's good.
it's got to be true, right? These people aren't going to give up their lives for something that's a lie.
That's right.
So we're using people like Peter, some people like Paul. Paul's another great example, right? He started out in a position of power. He had authority to put Christians in prison. And then on his road to Damascus, he has a meeting with Yeshua, right? The encounter that he has on the road. And he gives up his position of power to be like them. Why would he do that if it wasn't true? There's no logical explanation other than it has to be true. So we're using people like Peter, people like Paul, people like Yeshua, who we can confirm from outside sources exists and did a lot of he did what he said he did, right? To look back at the Old Testament and say, hey, these things are confirmed, right? They believe them to be true. So therefore, because we believe these people to be true and accurate, we can also trust the Old Testament as well and what it has to say. Let's look at John chapter 8, verses 39 through 40. And I won't, that'll be the last one we read. But and then I'll talk about the last ones. We won't necessarily read through them, but I'll put them out to you to look over on your own time.
Abraham is our father. Yeshua said to them, if you were Abraham's children, you would do the works of Abraham. But now you seek to kill me, a man who has spoken to you the truth, which I heard from Elohim. Abraham did not do this.
Right, so Yeshua is using Abraham to make a point, right? So he's talking about the works of Abraham. Where do we see anything about the works of Abraham? We see them in Torah. We don't see them anywhere else, right? We see them in Torah. So Yeshua is using Abraham, like I said, to make a point. And he's also doing something else for us, confirming to Abraham that he believes, that Yeshua believes Abraham existed. And not only did he exist, but he did certain works, and that, you can use that to point, to me, right? Abraham is pointing to Yeshua. Because the discussion between Yeshua and the Pharisees goes throughout the whole chapter of chapter 8. And, he's going back and forth with them about different things. And it's confirming that the Old Testament is true. It's accurate. He's affirming it. If he didn't believe in the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible, this is a good opportunity for him to insert something about it not being false, or it not being true, right? Or it being false in this way or that way. He could have done that, but he doesn't. He affirms it. We won't read it because it's way too long, but in Acts chapter 7, verses 1 through 53, Stephen, right, an early disciple, right, he's given a speech, right, to these people, and he's just letting them have it. He's just letting them have it. And he's talking about Noah. He's talking about, Abraham. He's giving them their history, right? History from the Torah, as they all understand it. They know these things that he's saying are true. They're not mad at him for saying that they're true. They're mad at him for using them against them, right? And so they grit their teeth and they stone him, right? Which is very sad. But it's, why would that story be included by Luke, who's the author of Acts, right? Why would Stephen be willing to give up his life for a lie? It doesn't make sense. He believes it to be true, right? Yeshua believes it to be true. Stephen believes it to be true. Paul believes it to be true. Peter believes it to be true. Hebrews 11, whoever the author of Hebrews is, there's lots of speculation out there. Is it Paul? Is it somebody else? Who is it? It doesn't matter who it is. It's considered scripture for various reasons. And in Hebrews 11, it gives a hall of faith. I mean, it's talking about a lot of people in that hall of faith. Those people appear in the Torah, so it's affirming the Torah, the law. It's affirming the writings. It's affirming all these things. Paul, in Romans chapter 5, verses 12 through 21, we won't read it there, but he's talking about Adam. Where is Adam recorded for us? It's recorded for us in the Torah. So Paul is believing and affirming that the story of Adam is true. Right? There's truth to it. It has validity, and it should be considered. And he's using it to make a lesson about Yeshua, right? The first Adam and the last Adam, right? So he's using it to make a point.
Yes, even Christ himself, during his ministry, he was drawn back from the Torah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeshua used it over and over again. It's quoted from over and over again.
That's all he had.
Right.
Right. Right. So you have a lot of good reasons to believe that the books that we have in the Old Testament are legitimate. That they are not just historically accurate, and have scientific backing, right? The claims that it's making are accurate, but it's also inspired because of the prophecies that have come true over time. And it would take way too long to lay out for you all of the different prophecies that have come to pass in the scriptures. But I encourage you to look at that on your own time. If you ever have a doubt that this is the inspired word of God. Right? So when asked the question, has God really said, we should be able to, excitedly say, yes. Yes, he did. He said it. He said it over and over and over again. This is the inspired word of God. We can trust it. You can take it to the bank and stake your life on it, like the disciples did. All right. So, yes.
Well, I heard one thing this week when I was driving around is like, where else could you have 66 books written by 40 different authors and all of them meshed together perfectly? Mm-hmm. It's an impossibility. It couldn't happen. It has to be divine inspiration.
Amen.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so those things that are excluded, maybe they had something in there that was contradictory to it, right? And people can pick apart the Bible all day long. But here's the bottom line. Everything in our culture has its foundational root in the Bible.
That's right.
This is our roots. The whole world has been influenced by the Bible, by the authors of the Bible, by Yeshua. The whole world. You can't have that much impact and influence throughout geography and throughout time unless it's something special. And that brings me to one of the to my final point. The concept of storytelling. Telling stories it's got to be the best vehicle for helping to convey complex thoughts in a simple way that's easy to understand. So when you look at the Bible and you're like, why is a story included, right? Why is it just a bunch of random stories? It's not random. There's something in there. There's a concept in there. There's an insight in there to point you to something else. Not every single thing is going to point to Yeshua, right? But it's going to point to the idea that we should be able to trust it. There are lots of reasons to believe it. We can't, like I said last time, we can't stay ignorant and be wise.
That's right.
We have to be wise. And the way that you become wise, right, is being familiar with the data, the information, and turning it into knowledge and knowing how to apply it, turning it into wisdom. Right. So we've got to know these details so that way when we get asked, Give me a reason for why you believe in the Bible is true. Give me a reason for why you think the Torah should still be applicable to me today as a, post-Yeshua, post-resurrection believer. We've got to have reasons for it.
That's right.
And so that's part of what we'll continue to build on.
And I want to say something here at the end, as I think this is a good way to segue in. So I saw something earlier this week I thought was good and noteworthy to tell the group. So Psalms 117 happens to be the shortest chapter in the Bible. Psalms 119 happens to be the longest chapter in the Bible.
Right.
There are 584 chapters, excluding 118, before 117, Psalms 117.
Mm-hmm.
There's 594 chapters after Psalms 117. If you take the numbers and add them up, you get 1,188.
Okay.
And that takes me to Psalms 118:8. It is better to take refuge in the Lord than to trust in man.
Amen.
So, oh no man, nothing. Trust, put your trust in man.
There you go. There you go.
I think for me this is very good because almost everybody believes something or other from the Word, but when you go speaking the Word, the way you're learning it is like, well, you've got different people coming at you because that's not how they believe.
Right.
So mostly I believe that this is good for us to know what we stand on and what the truth is, because we have not only experienced it by listening, but searching the scriptures to see that it is so.
That's right.
And
That's
whether
right.
people agree with you or not, I think it's for our own learning. And for your spirit to grow in the truth. Because we've been given watered down religion till the cows come home, and who's right and who's wrong and that kind of stuff, because a lot of us, I'm sure, I guess I'm the older one here, but anyway, a lot of us we've been in and out of churches, but when you keep hearing the same thing over and over and over, and then you find out, well, that preacher or that teacher did not even go to seminary school, or they're not really, where are they getting it? And they call it the Spirit. Mm-hmm. But when now that I'm learning in a different way, it's like, wait a second, they're blaming the Spirit for just watered down religion that got passed on, instead of what does the Word really say. And now in my Bible is, the Lord said, highlight. The Lord said, highlight.
You got a lot of highlights.
Because there was a time that I was sold on the feast. I was sold on them until somebody said, those are not the Jewish feasts. The Lord said, these are my feasts.
Right.
And that makes all the difference in the world. Is what the Lord really says. That's what I want to know. And that's basically what I said to someone a while back. I don't care what the churches are saying. I want to know what the Word says, what God really said.
That's right.
Amen. Amen. Absolutely. And there are a lot of people that will tell you all kinds of different things about the Scriptures. Can you back it up?
That's right.
Show me how these things are true. Can you? And so that's my intention, right? Is behind going through all these, looking at different evidences, right? There's all kinds of different evidence. It boils down to direct evidence and indirect evidence. None of us has direct evidence, right? Direct evidence, you saw it happen, or there's video of it happening. There's no direct evidence. All of it is indirect, which makes someone who works cold case murders very adept at being able to identify the information that's out there, that's available, and draw a logical conclusion, right? You might not, this is the thing, right? We can all look at the same data and draw different inferences from it, okay? But, so that is possible, right? People are going to interpret the data differently, and usually it's based on their bias, right? It's based on their agenda. So, what is your bias, right? So research that. If you're going to try to get in a debate with somebody, okay, which way are you, currently bent? Like, who pays your bills, right? What is your goal in life? Can I really trust what you're going to say over what this says, right? Over what the evidence is suggesting, right? So look at all the evidence, treat it honestly, and if it doesn't fit your preconceived, your confirmation bias, right, then you're going to have to be flexible in your position if you want to stay honest with the position. And what that means is, if the Bible says that the feast days are the Lord's feast days and they're applicable to us today, and me as a New Testament, Bible believer, I have to look at that and say, yeah, it does say that these are God's days. And it does say that you're supposed to do them forever.
That's right.
And so an honest person will be flexible in their position and change it to align with the Word rather than denominational doctrine. That's
Flexibility leads to growth.
yeah, absolutely. If you stay stuck, that's a great way for the enemy to be able to outflank you and take you out. Right? So the only true refuge is in the Lord. Right. So if you're outside of His covering because you don't believe these things to be so, then you're vulnerable. So I would encourage you to continue to grow and searching these things out for yourselves to see that these things are true. And if you're doing something that isn't in line with the Word, then you've got to be flexible enough to align yourself with the Word, because there's too many evidences to suggest that it is not inspired. So hopefully this was valuable to you, and we'll pick it up again next week. Shabbat shalom.
Shalom.